Hello YouTube chess lovers and my friends, this is Gunjan here. Welcome to the 22nd episode of Dirty Chess Tricks. In this episode, I'm going to show you an amazing shock weapon against Philidor or Black Lion opening. The modern Philidor or the Black Lion opening arises after the move order e4, d6, d4, knight to f6, attacking e4, knight to c3, and now there are two ways black can respond. And the first one, black can play the move immediately e5, and after the move knight to f3, black continue here with the move knight b to d7. Now instead of knight b to d7, black can also capture the pawn, which is an old main line, but I think after knight captures d4, black position is very passive, and among both the good reply, that is g6 and bishop to e7, I have covered my own replica in the PGN. So kindly go through the PGN where I have covered this line in the detail. Now as per the Black Lion move replica, here black can continue with the move knight b to d7, and after the move knight to f3 and e5, we reach the same position. There's a third transposition in this position via the e4 e5 move order. So let's say e4, e5, knight to f3, d6, d4, knight to f6, knight to c3, and now knight b to d7, we pretty much reach the same position. Now as usual, I'm going to suggest a very surprising and aggressive reply by white, and here we are going to continue with the move bishop to c4. Now as I have highlighted over here, black has few choices. Amongst them, bishop to e7 is the main move, but we should see what happens if your opponent plays other moves. So the first dubious move I want to consider is c6, which is to my surprise even higher rank opponent has tried this, but after d captures e5, black has just lost the game in the opening. The simple reason is if he captured back with the pawn, then after knight to g5, there's a devastation on f7 which cannot be prevented. And if he captured by the knight, then the simplest is you capture this knight, and after pawn captures and bishop to f7, not only black king will be misplaced, but at this point white is a clear pawn up. The second move black can try over here is e captures d4, but after this I'm recommending that you should capture with the queen, and now black has nothing better than to play bishop to e7 at this position. Anish Giri, one of the top super GM in the world, once played this line against a Chinese grandmaster, and here he got ultimate shock after the move bishop captures f7. Black doesn't have any choice, black has to accept this, but then after knight to g5, it's very funny that black has the only good move, that is king to e8, which not many of your opponent is going to find out. Anyways, I have attached this model game in the PGN, so you can refer it and get a good idea how to play after bishop captures f7. Finally, we come to the move bishop to e7. So black is in the verge of consolidating his position, but here comes the super surprising move knight to g5. This is known as Nimzowitsch Larobok variation, and recently this variation comes into the limelight, and black doesn't know the theory about this variation, then he can straight away demolish in the opening. So let's see what's the idea. So first of all, here black is forced to castle, otherwise the f7 pawn hangs, and after that we are going to continue with the move bishop captures f7. It's a check, and black cannot run away with the check because after king to h8 and knight to e6, black will simply lose a queen. So that's not possible, so that's why rook f7 is forced, and afterwards we are not going to immediately capture the rook, but we are going to play the move knight to e6, attacking the queen. Queen has the only one spot, which is queen to e8, and after that we are simply going to capture another pawn, which is knight captures c7. Now here black has to play queen to d8 because after queen to f8 and knight captures rook, black has to waste one more tempo to secure the c7 square. So that's why queen to d8 is forced at this position. Afterwards we are going to capture the rook in the corner. So let's talk for a moment and find out what exactly happening in the position. As a white, what we have get is we get a rook and a 2 pawn for the 2 minor piece. And it is very important to understand what is the plan of the campaign from the white side. Well, it is very obvious that we want to exchange as many as pieces in the game, and we want to reach to the end game where these 2 pawns and the rook can majorly outplay these 2 minor pieces. And this is pretty much our plan of campaign. Now here, as I highlighted over here, black has very few limited choices, and against each of them I'm going to show you one of my own model games which will give you a very good idea how to play such a positions as a white. The first move I want to consider is b6, which is in fact the most popular move at this position, but I think it is less accurate and white can meet this with a tricky move, knight to b5. Here black has to be very careful, otherwise the game can be lost immediately in the opening. Now there are 4 moves majoritarily try against me. Amongst them the main move is a6, but let's see what is wrong with the other moves. So the first move I want to consider is bishop to a6, which looks very natural because it's attacking 2 knights, but after white's one reply, that is knight to c7, it's funny that bishop has to retrieve back, but after that our dancing knight comes out from the black camp with a style. So we have here knight to e6 attacking the queen, queen to c8, knight to g5 attacking the rook, rook to f8, and after the move knight to c3, just early in the opening we are 2 pawn and exchange up. Well, the same goes with the second move, that is bishop to b7, because after knight to c7 black has nothing better than a6, but then our dancing knight comes out with the move knight to e6, queen c8, knight to g5, pawn captures, knight captures, king captures, pawn captures, pawn captures, and now f3, where white has obtained 2 rooks for the 3 minor pieces, and not to mention there are some horrible pawn structures in the black camp. The third move black can try over here is knight to e8, so safeguarding the c7, but against this I'm recommending that you should continue here with the move bishop to e3. Now to win the piece immediately with the bishop move is a very bad idea by black. So let me show you quickly what happens. Let's say if the opponent plays bishop to a6, then after knight captures b6, knight captures and a4, at this point white emerged with a 3 pawn and a rook for the 2 pieces, which is a more than a sufficient advantage. And instead of bishop to e6, if your opponent try the move bishop to b7, then after knight captures, pawn captures, and the move d5, this position is even better than the previous one. The third move black can try over here is e captures d4, but I don't think so this will change the scenario, because after the move queen captures d4, somewhere down the line black has to play bishop moves. Let's say bishop to a6, then knight a to c7, knight captures d6, bishop captures, queen captures. Once again we obtain 3 pawns and a rook for 2 minor pieces. And if bishop to b7 at this point, then the simplest is you capture this pawn, and after pawn captures and castle on the king side, we again get 3 pawns and a rook for the 2 minor piece. So you can see after knight to b5, it's not easy for the black to come out from great difficulties. Okay, let's consider the most critical reply by the black over here, that is a6. Well, after this I'm recommending that you should continue here with the move knight to c7. Now if allowed, then knight to e6 and both the knight will be escaped. So here black is forced to capture this knight. Afterwards we are going to continue here with the move knight to e6. Now if you're playing much higher rank opponent, I'm strongly insisting over here that you can take the draw immediately after repetitions such as queen to e8, knight to c7, queen to d8, knight to e6, and so on. But let's say you're playing this position against a lower rated, or maybe you're playing for the win, then you can continue with the following line, which is after queen to e8, knight to g5 attacking the rook, rook to f8, and now the move castle on the king side. Now to illustrate the plan of the campaign by the white, I'm going to show you one of my own game where my opponent was 2100 plus rated, where he continued with the move bishop to b7 attacking the e4. I played f3 and now he continued with the move queen to g6. No matter, I continue here with the move knight to e6 attacking the rook, rook to c8, and now very important move d5. Well, obviously black is ahead in the development at this position, but if you carefully look at the black pieces, they are very much cramped and they don't have much scope, and that's where our advantage lies. My opponent continued here with the move knight to c5. I captured this piece, which at first sight looks horrible because it straightened up black pawn structure, but I have a specific idea in the mind. Here I continue with the move c3. My opponent played bishop to a6. I played rook to f2, so getting out of any discoveries. He continued with the move knight to h5, but I think this knight to h5 and knight to f4 idea is very slow and I can immediately exploit it with the move a4. My opponent indeed played the move knight to f4, and it is very obvious that just like Sicilian, whenever this knight arrives on c4 or f4, we are going to chop up this knight with the move bishop captures. After pawn captures and the move e5, I think black is in a trouble. Now obviously this is a pawn sacrifice, and after some calculation my opponent indeed accepted. But after that I continue with the move a captures b5, and after bishop captures b5, I come out with a very nasty move, that is d6. Well, what to do? Well, the simple idea is if black captures this pawn, then after queen to b3 he's going to lose a piece. And apart from that, the best move over here which is played by my opponent, that is bishop to h4. So his idea is to counter attacking me. But after queen check, queen to f7, rook to d2, queen has been exchanged, bishop to f6, rook to a7, bishop to c4 attacking the rook. But after the white's next reply, that is d7, black position is already losing. The simple reason is after rook to d8, rook captures c5 attacking the bishop, bishop to e6, and now the move b4. This is exactly I was talking about at the early stage. White has this majority on the queen side, and what we want to do is that these two pawns and a rook can clearly outplay these two minor pieces. And in fact the game finished very quickly. So let me show you the rest of the moves very quickly. My opponent captured this pawn. I played rook to d5, pinning that bishop. So black has not many good options. He continued here with the move bishop to e8, but after rook captures, bishop captures, rook to a8, he gave me this check, and after king to f1 and king to f7, this is completely winning endgame for the white. Rook to b8, bishop to e3, b5, king e7, b6, bishop to b5, c4, a very good move, bishop captures c4, king to e1, king to d7, b7, king to c7, and now the star move, rook to c8, which not only nab a piece, but the resulting endgame is completely winning. The second move black can try over here is e captures d4, but I think this is probably the most easiest variation you have to handle, because after queen captures d4, we are already attacking a7 and black response is forced here. Black has to play moves such as b6. Well, after that we are going to continue here with the move bishop to e3. Kindly note, if bishop to a6, then queen to a4 is a very strong reply. So the best move over here is bishop to b7, but then we can immediately capture this pawn, and after pawn captures and castle on the king side, not only white has achieved 3 pawn and a rook for 2 minor pieces, but the most important factor is black has some severe pawn weaknesses on the queen side. In the PGN, I have included a game of mine against a FIDE master, which will give you an idea how white should continue from here onwards. Now the third and the most critical reply tried by the black over here is b5. This is a direct attempt from black to refute the white opening idea. Now the first thing you should note over here is you cannot capture this pawn, because after queen check and knight comes back and then black plays knight captures e4, black is completely winning in such a position. So you are not going for the pawn grabbing, but instead of that I'm recommending that you should continue here with the move f3. Obviously black has three different good choices, but against each of them white obtain a very good position. So the first move I want to consider is a6, which in a way saving that pawn. Here white has a good reply, that is d captures e5. Kindly note, if knight captures e5, then after the move bishop to e3, that knight can easily escape. Knight to d7 doesn't help it, because after knight to d5 there is enough support for that knight to come out. So knight captures e5 is not possible at this point, so black has to capture with the pawn, and then we are going to continue here with the move knight to d5. So now white is all set to arrange an evacuation for the knight. So black has to stop it, and the only good way to stop it is to capture this knight. But after that queen captures d5 will give white a winning position. I reached this position against a 1900 rated opponent, where my opponent continued with the move bishop to c5. So he stopped my castle, but never mind, I continue here with the move bishop to d2, and after the move queen to e7, which has an idea of knight to f6. But after white's next reply, that is queen to c6, attacking the bishop and at the same time supporting the c7 square, black is completely busted. He continued with the move queen to f8, but after knight to c7, he realized that he is an exchange down for not a single compensation. In short, a6 gives a very good advantage to the white. So let's look at some of the critical reply by black. The first move I want to consider is bishop to a6. So idea is not only to regain the piece, but in some lines, if white castle on the king side, then b4 occurs with a tempo. So as a white, you need to play a very careful chess. Here I'm recommending that you should continue with the move a4, attacking the b4 immediately. And after the obvious reply b4, you should continue with the move knight to d5. So now if allowed, then knight to c7 will definitely on the card. So black has to capture a piece. After that, I'm recommending that you should continue with the move knight to c7. This is a case of my game against a WIM, where she continued here with the move queen to b7. I capture her dangerous bishop. She recaptured with the queen, and now the good move d captures e5. Kindly note, if knight captures e5, then queen to e2, and not only white is exchanging everything, but it will give black a horrible pawn structure. So in the game she decided to capture with the pawn, but after that I continue with the move bishop to e3. My opponent continued with the move bishop to c5. I played queen to e2, so hitting the queen, and if the queen are exchanged, as I mentioned earlier, this position is quite favorable to the white. My opponent played queen to d6. I simply castle on the king side, and now she continued with the move a5. So once again we reached to the same scenario where white has a two-pawner rook for the two minor pieces, and this game will give you a very good insight how one should continue. Here I get a tempo on the queen with the move rook f to d1. My opponent played queen to c7. I capture his bishop. She captured with the queen. I park my king in the corner, and now she continued with the move h6. Well, so far we are defending, but now it's our turn to attack, and after some calculation I decided to open up the position with the move c3. Obviously this is a pawn sack, which my opponent indeed accept the challenge, but my idea is now to play rook d to c1. So now I have some open lines for my rook, and it turns out that this is very deadly for her. She responded with the move queen to b4, and now simple plan, we want to exchange the queen and reach to the end game where this position is quite favorable to the white. My opponent responded here with the move rook to f8, so she desperately want to activate his rook, but after queen captures, pawn captures, rook to b4, attacking the pawn, rook to b8, and now rook to b3. So it's very important to blockade that pawn. My opponent continued with the move king to f7, so desperately want to defend queenside with the king, but after rook to c4 it is very obvious that b pawn is going down. My opponent continued with his king journey, which is king to e6. I capture the pawn, and after rook captures and rook captures. At first sight it looks like black can easily handle that pawn with the two knights, but in fact this position is completely winning. My opponent continued here with the move knight to e8. I played a5. She played knight to c5, so stopping a6, but it's just an illusion because a6 does happens. It's funny that knight cannot capture because of the simple rook check. My opponent desperately tried to rescue the position with the two knights, so she played knight to c7. I continue with the move a7, and you can see the potential of this position. Last 4 moves, pawn moves, and still black cannot able to capture that pawn with the knight. She played king to d7, but after rook to b8 the position is already gone. Few moves has been played, knight to a6, promoting with the queen, and after knight captures and rook captures, she just resigned at this position in the view of white has an exchange and a clear pawn advantage. Now the third and the final move black can try over here is bishop to b7. So idea is to capture the knight immediately. Well, here you have two choices. You can capture the pawn or you can play the move d5. Now knight captures b5 is completely fine for the white, and I have included the whole line in the PGN, but the move which I favor over the knight to b5 is d5. The simple reason is this will completely block the mobility of black pieces. Now if your opponent plays moves such as b4, then knight e2 is always a good move. So in this game where my opponent was a FIDE master, he continued with the move a6. No matter, I continue with the move b4, so stopping any b4 advancement by black. He captured my piece, and I responded immediately on the queen side with the move a4. My opponent counterattacked my knight with the move queen to c8. I defended with the move bishop to d2, and now indeed he has to pay attention on the queen side. Finally he decided to capture this pawn, but after knight captures, white is obviously in the good shape. He continued with the move knight to h5, so same idea, that is knight to f4, but we don't bother, we just castle on the king side, and after the move knight to f4, even we don't need to capture that knight over here because we can continue here with the move g3. And funny enough, black doesn't have any good option except going back on the g6. So black has wasted so many tempos, and this is all happens because of that wonderful move d5. I continue here with the move queen to e2. So it's a cheap trap that if black capture this pawn, then after rook f to c1, queen to b3 and rook to c3, black simply lose a queen. Obviously he doesn't fall for that. Instead of that, he continued with the move bishop to d8. I responded with the move rook f to c1, and now he tried to resolve his cramp pieces with the move knight to b6. But I think it's a bad idea because this is exactly white wants, as after the move c4, white plan on the queen side campaign is already running down. My opponent here captured my knight, I recaptured with the rook, and now he continued with the move rook to c7. So his idea is to stop me to play c5, but to his surprise, yep, c5 indeed happened. And you should always consider this move if you have a good tactics in the position. My idea is when my opponent has to forcefully capture this pawn, I want to play the move d6. So attacking the rook. There's only one way to hang on to this pawn, by playing the move rook to c7. But then I continue with the move queen check, king to h8, and now wonderful center and 2-pawn advantage. And look at the black. Horrible pieces. In fact, the game finished within few moves. He continued with the move queen to d7, rook to b4, knight to f8, bishop to e3, a5 attacking the rook, rook to b3, and the critical mistake happened at the move knight to e6. Before I move on, I like you to pause this video and find out What is wrong with the move knight to e6? Okay, I hope you find this easiest continuation, that is rook captures b7, queen captures b7 and queen captures e6, not only simplifying the position with a great advantage, but white has a concrete threat of queen to e8, which not only threatening a checkmate but as well as grabbing a piece, and black cannot defend both the threat. That's it guys. I hope with this brief analysis now you are confident enough to play this line. This line has a great surprise value and not many Philidor players are ready for it. I have personally gone through so many videos and books and there are hardly any mention of this line. Remember the plan of campaign which I have suggested throughout the video, that you are trying to exchange as many as pieces and going into the end game where this rook and 2 or maybe 3 pawns clearly outplayed your opponent's 2 minor pieces and you get a great advantage in the clock as well. Well, thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment on my video, and I'll meet you in my next episode very soon. Bye and take care. And it contains lots of tricks. Once again, black has few options, but believe it or not, they all leads to a very miserable position. And it's great fun to watch all of them. So let's see each by turn. And still white is going to play this amazing stunner, that is d5. It's just like indirectly saying to the white, sorry buddy, d5 is mine.